Talking baseball, baseball and the Orioles.
Oh, welcome to the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast, gang. I am, of course, your host, Benny. So excited to be back in front of you folks today to talk Orioles baseball. So let's jump right into it, gang. We're going to jump into the game from yesterday, game 14 of spring training. Another victory for these Orioles. They continue to dominate their way through this spring training, and it's a beautiful thing to see. We're not going to look too much into the box scores, but there are things that I would like to touch on from yesterday's game. It was a 4-3 win over the Tigers, and you saw some good things. Gunnar had yet another day where he got on base and hit a double. It was a nice line drive to right field, gang. Really stayed on that baseball. You love seeing it, and that oblique looks fine. It's starting to be like, what oblique? You're starting to forget there was ever even an issue, and he wasn't around the first week or so of games for the Orioles, okay? So, Gunnar looks great. 1 for 3, double. Also, guys that are looking good, there weren't many great standouts offensively in this game. So, there weren't amazing moments necessarily to talk about. But you have guys like Mounty, you guys like O'Hearn, you got a guy like James McCann, all 1 for 3 at the dish. That's very nice to see. A guy that's starting to get going, and we'll touch on this a little bit more, but Heston 2 for 3 with a double. You love seeing it. I believe that was his first game all spring where he got multi-hits in the game, which fantastic to see, but we'll touch on that a little bit more. So offensively, you saw some things. Wong drove in a run. We'll touch on him a little later as well. But the pitching is really what stood out to me from yesterday's game, okay? Grayson Rodriguez, 3 1/3 inning, only 1 K. It was kind of a goofy stat line, okay? Only 1 K, gave up 6 hits, 2 walks, a lot of base runners, but he only gave up 1 run, and that was a home run in the 4th. So ultimately, he worked himself out of trouble despite the fact that he wasn't able to strike guys out. And I think that's an encouraging sign. I could see people looking at that pessimistically and thinking, oh no, like, is Gray Rod not going to be able to strike guys out? We talked after his last start about how his velocity was down. People were a little worried about that. We talked about how the velocity down was by design. I didn't see the numbers on his velocity yesterday. I didn't dig into that. However, when you look at the results, again, encouraging. You could look at it as discouraging. He let up a lot of base runners. Maybe got lucky to get out of some jams. He gave up a home run, but it was only a solo shot. So, with a lot of runners on, and you gave up a home run, sometimes that's going to work negatively for you. But we talked about the elite pitchers in baseball, the guys that are at that upper echelon, and how they seem to give up their home runs when nobody is on base. So maybe it's very encouraging to see the fact that he couldn't keep guys off of base, but was able to make sure that when he did make his mistake, it was when there was nobody on base. And I believe that home run he gave up was the last guy he saw all day. Again, I didn't dig into it fully, but just based off of the home run in the 4th and pitching 3 1/3, I would assume that Brandon Hyde pulled him after that solo shot. But again, I'm encouraged by it because I think he's going to have a lot of days where he gets 7, 8, 9 strikeouts. And he's going to be blowing a lot of guys away at a lot of points. But that's not going to happen every day in baseball. You're not always going to have your strikeout stuff as a pitcher. And in those days, it's very encouraging to see that he's learned, hopefully, how to get out of those situations without giving up a run. Maybe only giving up 1 run. Staying away from the crooked number is possibly the ultimately most important thing a pitcher can do. Staying out of the crooked number. You got to get outs and stay away from crooked numbers. They're going to score some runs off of you eventually. That's just baseball. It's about minimizing that damage and making sure you can get out of that jam before it becomes a real issue, before the game slips away from you. And we have the offense to get ourselves back into those games when they slip away from us, but you don't want to see that more often than not. You want to be able to see the guy getting outs, getting out of innings, not allowing big run innings when the teams do score. So then when we look at the bullpen, you saw some good things. We touched last episode on Craig Kimbrell and how he hasn't looked good so far in spring games. And I think that there's a path farther down the line in the season to where he might lose the closing job. But we saw an encouraging moment this past game when Kimbrell went a scoreless inning. Listen, as a closer, that's all you have to do. I don't need you to strike all three guys out. I just need you to get three guys out. And he put up a scoreless inning, I believe, a perfect inning. I'm pretty sure. When I remember looking at the box score, I'm pretty sure nobody got on base on him. But either way, scoreless. And that's going to close out games. So encouraging there. Another encouraging one is Yennier Cano, whose name I haven't heard a ton. Has a 0 ERA at this point in camp. But I'm not sure how many games he's pitched, actually. In fact, this could potentially have been his only situation where he's gotten into a spring game thus far. But he went scoreless. So neither here or there, Yennier Cano at least coming out looking solid. And that's a huge factor for the Orioles. Then you got Webb and Baker. Listen, they're kind of back-end bullpen names. They're kind of depth pieces more for us. But it's still encouraging that they also pitched a scoreless inning. So, again, I don't want to dig too much. Cionel Perez was the one that really got dinged up a bit, gave up 2 runs in the 8th. But, listen, it happens, guys. It happens in the regular season. And if that's your bad inning, 2 runs, I can live with that from Cionel Perez. Because I think more often than not, he's going to be able to hold it down and give us these scoreless innings. Like he's shown us the past couple years he can provide. So, that's yesterday's game. Again, I don't want to waste too much time and dig too much into it. In fact, I think maybe we've already talked too much about it. I was going to look into the lineup construction yesterday. I was going to dig into that because I think that how the lineup was constructed yesterday is kind of a sign sometimes on the lineup we're going to see. But the lineup didn't include Rushman and Mullins. So there's a lot of things that can change the lineup. One of those 2 guys will most likely be leading off, if not definitely in the top 2 or 3 of the batting order most days. Maybe not against a lefty if they're both playing, but we'll see. Again, I think we're going to dig into that in a future episode. I jotted down, in fact, a couple future episodes. I want to pull back the curtain a bit and show you guys kind of what's to come. Obviously, we'll continue touching on the games themselves. Obviously, we're going to keep you up to date on cuts. In fact, there were a couple cuts. I told you they were coming last episode, and they actually came a couple days early from where I thought they would happen, but they ultimately came, and they weren't surprising. And we'll not only inform you of that next, but we're going to keep you up to date throughout camp when that stuff happens, and we'll touch on all of that, and we'll talk about some position battles, and we'll keep you up to date on everything Baltimore Orioles pretty much going on. However, that's not all. I mean, it's all going to be related to the Orioles, but we're not only going to talk about the individual guys and the games and things along those lines, okay? We're going to also, again, look at lineup constructions, ways that Brandon Hyde can manipulate this lineup, but I think he's going to try, for the most part, to have a pretty set lineup on most days. Now, given there's a lot of filtration, there's a lot of situations where one guy can play first or DH or play right, or Mateo can play at short or in center. And so there's a lot of flexibility with these Orioles, and it's something they emphasize and love to have. And there's a guy that we're going to touch on a little bit later that is coming to the table when that flexibility, when that utility type situation plays itself out. And the Orioles love to have that. And it's huge when you're building a team because there's a lot of talent on this Orioles roster. And injuries are going to happen. And cold streaks are going to happen. So it's nice to know that you have real guys that can come in and contribute on those times when they need to step up and play for a 2-week stretch to bridge an injury. We talked about those pitchers, those starting pitchers, and how we have to bridge that gap. Well, there's going to be more throughout the season. So we'll dig into those lineup constructions and kind of stuff along those lines in a future episode. Another thing we want to touch on is I'm going to go around to each position and kind of just give my take on the position going into the year. Obviously, a move could happen. We already talked about a potential move I think could happen, a blockbuster I think could happen. But we're going to dig into the positions as we see them now. We're going to look at the depth. We're going to look at the minor leagues too in that, most likely. And kind of show you guys that even if they don't break camp, with a good start, first half, could find themselves on this roster at that position midway through the season. Heck, a month into the season. So then I also want to compare us to kind of other teams in the league. Give you a bit of a landscape on where I believe the Orioles stand in the league. Now, I'm primarily only going to focus that when it comes to the American League. For 2 reasons, mostly. One, because we have to win a pennant in order to win the World Series. So, really, we just have to be the best American League team to accomplish that at the end of the day. The best American League team. The last American League team standing. So, because of that, as much as I have glory, hopes, and dreams of the World Series coming this year, and I still do, and I'm sure I will all throughout this year, until it either happens or we fall short. But that's for the future to decide. That's for this season to decide. I really want to compare us to the AL because I made a comment in one of the earlier episodes about how I don't see really the competition out there in the American League for the Orioles. That's not to say there aren't a few teams that certainly are competition for us to win that pennant. But as opposed to the NL, I think the AL has a much easier route to somewhat dominating a league. Dominating the league. And so we're going to look into that and really compare us not only to the AL East teams, but really every team in the AL. And some are going to be very snap of the fingers. I don't got to dig much into why the Orioles are going to be better than the Oakland Athletics, soon to be Las Vegas Athletics. But other teams I am going to want to dig into, and I am going to want to state our case. I'm going to look at that almost as I'm an attorney, okay? This is stupid, but growing up, I had a lot of attorneys in my family. My dad was an attorney. My grandpa is an attorney still in his 90s. His brother's an attorney still. They have multiple sons who are attorneys. I have multiple cousins right now in law school. I have a lot of lawyers tied and connected to the family. Not to mention, my dad had a lot of friends who obviously were attorneys. So I spent a lot of time around attorneys. And growing up, every time I would go to like one of my friends' houses or something and we talk to their parents and, you know, I might be by for a small argument. Nothing big, nothing crazy, but like take us to the grocery store. Because, you know, you're 12 years old, you're 10 years old, you're bored. You love going to the grocery store. They'll buy you a treat if you go to the grocery store. So whatever, like, you want to get the right snacks. You want to get the right soda as a kid. So, and the parents are like, no, I don't want, because they know they're going to spend more money if they bring it. But ultimately, you know, they're kind of having this little debate, and, you know, I might find the right thing. I might hear the right thing that I just interject one or two things. And the parent would always look at me and go, God, you should be a lawyer in the future. In fact, I took the LSAT. Stupid fun fact about myself. I took the LSAT after college. And I did above average. And then I didn't apply to any law schools. I just couldn't see me one, wanting to read all of that boring material because the lawyers read a lot. And I don't mind reading. I love reading about the Orioles, but I just don't like reading about stupid, boring stuff. But two, I don't know. I mean, again, I've been around a lot of lawyers, and most lawyers will tell you don't be a lawyer. So including a lot of the lawyers in my family said, don't be a lawyer, Ben. So I went away from it. And for the best, I believe. I believe I'm much happier right now, today, than I would have been if I was a lawyer or an attorney or whatever. Anyway, so why I'm saying all of that is, in that comparison to the other AL teams, I'm almost going to try in a court of law, if you will, plead my case for the Orioles against this team. And why I believe the Orioles will ultimately not only be a better team than that team, but make it farther and get to the World Series over that team. Because, spoiler alert, I think the Orioles are winning the AL pennant this year. I do. I'm gung-ho. The Orioles are winning the AL pennant this year. The only question is how much I'm putting on it, gang. It's the truth. So, along those lines, it's funny. I didn't plan ending that talk with that, but into our next topic, we're going to have a episode, and it might be a whole episode because I've told you before, I'm kind of a big gambler. I kind of enjoy gambling, especially on sports. That's my vice, if you will, or one of my vices. I love sports gambling. We all have a vice, and guilty as charged, I enjoy sports gambling responsibly. Anyway, we're going to probably have a whole episode, because that's how much I probably need, maybe even bring in a guest, on gambling. And we're going to talk about the gambling markets that I think are great bet for the Orioles. Things that I'm doing, including Orioles future bets, that I think is a great bet. And especially if you're doing these on the FanDuels and the DraftKings and things like that, things that are looking promising get offered cash outs typically. So if nothing more, I don't see any shot that you don't get at least a few juicy cash outs on the advice that I'm going to give in that episode. But that's another episode. We'll touch on all of that, okay? So those are some future episodes, and there's a lot more to come. We got a lot of fun things in the works. We got a lot of interesting things. We're talking about how to put together an episode from opening day. Maybe I get down there early, maybe hit a small tailgate. I know, Baltimore's not huge on the tailgates, but maybe opening day brings it out a little more. And maybe set up shop in a lot and do an episode from the tailgate on opening day. Something along those lines. We're figuring out a lot of stuff as we go, gang. But I'm excited. I'm excited for the future. Not just of this podcast, but of our beloved Orioles. My beloved Orioles. I think that we're really headed in a direction where, again, I believe we're winning the AL pennant this year and make a serious push for the World Series. I know we got a good friend out there, listener, follower, Jane. She's predicting Orioles over Phillies in 6. I could see it. I think she said the Phillies. Now I'm second guessing myself because a lot of people are coming to me talking up these Orioles and picking these Orioles to make this push. I love it. I absolutely love it. And before we get to our next topic, along those same lines, as a gambler, usually, I know that if everybody at the bar is telling me one thing, odds are that is not going to happen. When you're at the bar and everyone's like, oh, this team is going to crush them, the gambler in me says, probably not. Maybe they win, but they don't crush them most likely. And you're going to make a lot of money if you gamble in that sense. So a part of me gets worried when all of these people, especially non-Orioles fans, come to me talking up these Orioles to potentially make this run to the World Series and potentially win it. However, there are a lot of people still out there not buying into it, telling me that's your heart talking, telling me the Orioles are taking a step back. These were the same people telling me I was crazy last year. when their win total was 81.5. And I said it was the easiest money you will ever make. And they will be one of the best teams in baseball. And they cruised through that 81.5 over under to 101 victories. And these were the same naysayers 2 years ago that coming into the season when I said that they were not only building something to make this run, but they had the pieces in place to potentially make the run that year. And they didn't. They had a bad start. They had a tough first half of the year. But in that second half of the year, they were one of the best teams in baseball. And they were making a push to potentially being in the wild card. So don't tell me that those naysayers aren't out there. And don't tell me I'm crazy, because I've been preaching this the last 3 years to these same people. And yes, more people are jumping on this year, but overwhelmingly, I would say more people still look at me side-eyed, believe that they're an 80-something win team, an 88 win team, an 86 win team. Maybe you get to 91. No. Well, I mean, potentially, yes. Potentially, yes, they're around that 90 win mark. But they're a playoff team. I guarantee you of that. I will bet the house that the Orioles are a playoff team this year. So, I don't want to turn this into that gambling episode. I don't need to stand on this milk crate any longer. Okay? I don't need to stand on it any longer and tell you why the Orioles are going to win the pennant this year. At least at this moment. I'll get back on that crate. I'll get back up there on that podium. I'll be screaming it all season. I want to get to the rest of this, guys. I want to get to the rest of this episode. Because we got interesting stuff to talk about, okay? I could just rant and rave and scream about the Orioles winning it all and being in this. I'm just excited, okay? I'm just excited. All right. So I told you that the first cuts happened, that we got some cuts in camp. I thought they were coming Monday. They ended up coming Friday. But when you look at the guys they cut, it makes sense, right? I thought it was going to be Monday because I thought they might cut more positional players. Instead, they cut one catcher and a bunch of pitchers. And when I say cut, it's not the NFL cut, okay? These guys are just going back to the minor leagues, right? None of these guys had to be designated for assignment. None of these guys are at risk of being lost. So, when I say cut, they're just moving to the minor league camp, right? They're just getting cut out of major league camp for the Orioles. They're still on the roster, okay? And there's some notable names that will be back with this major league roster. If not this season, certainly next season. And those are two of our stud pitchers. And Seth Johnson, one of those starting pitching prospects, along with Povich and McDermott, who are kind of our big three as far as the starting pitching prospects go. Not that there aren't other good names that could make the jump into that this season. But just at the moment, Seth Johnson's kind of like that third guy, but between those three guys, to me, it's kind of, I don't know, yeah, hit or miss. I think you're probably going to have one really good one really decent one, and one okay one. That's what I think out of these three, and I don't know which one it's going to be. They have to sort that out. I'd love nothing more than all three to be studs, okay? But Seth Johnson, cut from Major League camp. Justin Armbruster, who was having a very nice camp. In fact, Seth Johnson was having a very nice camp, too. Both those guys wowed at Major League camp this year. But Justin Armbruster is another very nice name. More of a bullpen piece for us, but a big arm. I'm pretty sure a big boy, too. And the type of guy who's going to be back in Baltimore this season pitching for our O's. And I'm excited. He's probably, in my eyes, our best true relieving pitching prospect right now. I love Justin Armbruster moving forward. So I think come July, he's probably getting some innings in this bullpen. When there's an injury or two, which will happen, he'll be up. Another notable name, another reliever. We talked about him in a past episode. Knew that he didn't really have much of a chance to make a push for the major league roster, at least out of camp. But certainly has a chance to make the major league roster at some point this season if he continues to impress. And that's Ronald Guzman. I'm pretty sure he didn't even get an appearance in a spring game. But he's also kind of new to this pitching thing. Remember, he was a hitter for a while in the majors. Texas mostly, I think, bounced around to a couple teams. But ultimately has tried to make the transition over the past couple years to pitcher. And like we talked about previously, this is his first season focusing 100% on pitching. And the Orioles loved what they see out of this left-handed thrower. Hard thrower. And he's older, mid to late 30s. So there isn't a huge future, right? Which means that if he comes into the minors this season and pitches really well for the Orioles for the first month or two, there's a real chance Ronald Guzman could get a look at some point because it doesn't cost the Orioles anything as far as projecting to the future. It doesn't cost them anything for moving forward after this season. Odds are, no matter how good Guzman is for these Orioles, he's probably not back next season. And if he is, I don't think he's this key piece to them. He might be a reliable middle reliever and left-hander out of the pen, hard throwing. You know that they can work with these hard throwing guys. And it seems like there's a lot to work with when it comes to Ronald Guzman. So don't be surprised when we see that name throwing a few innings for us this season. I'd be surprised if he's throwing any innings for us come the postseason. But we'll see. We'll see. If he produces, you can't keep guys off the field that produce. At a certain point, if they're lights out, they're lights out, man. Why would you get rid of them? So those were really the three notable names. There were a couple other pitchers that dropped down, and like I said, one catcher that dropped down. But those are the notable cuts. Nothing shocking. And like I said in the last episode, this first round of cuts really wasn't ever going to show you a clearer picture of the roster for the most part. Now, Johnson and Armbruster and Guzman, somewhat because they were battling for Johnson that last rotation spot that he really didn't have a chance at. And Armbruster and Guzman were fighting for that last spot or two in the bullpen. But, you know, we talked about it last episode about kind of that battle for the final couple spots in that bullpen. And at no point did we bring up either of them. So it's fun, especially when you see other guys playing really good. Guys like Suarez, like we talked about. Multiple guys, though, out of the pen. So, like I said, doesn't paint a clearer picture as far as the roster goes. But we're moving ever closer to this season. It's exciting because the more of these cut days you get, that means the closer and closer you're coming for opening day, gang. And like I said, like I said, me and my fiance will be there. Couple good friends, John and Jane. Actually, the same Jane that made the comment are taking us to opening day. In fact, when I bring them up, I want to show you guys something cool real quick. Saw John yesterday digging through some of his old Orioles stuff. Got me a couple of the official programs. This one, I believe, from 79. Very cool. Very cool. And this one from the 83 championship season. Eddie on the front. Awesome stuff, gang. Awesome stuff. You gotta love it. Official stuff. Official programs. And I'll tell you the thing really that I love is seeing like the ads in it. It's pretty cool. It's pretty cool seeing the ads, but just everything. Just everything. And I'm going to dig through these more. Tried to put them up on the Orioles backdrop there. Couldn't really find a great place at the moment, but we'll find it. We'll figure it out. Maybe get them up on the wall somewhere around here or something. Very exciting, and I want to thank them a lot. I want to give them a big thank you. Very, very generous folks. Love them to death. So excited for opening day. Huge Orioles fans. Me and John were at the ALDS game 1 against the Rangers. Obviously didn't go our way, but we had a great day. Opening day is going to be a phenomenal day. And I can't wait. 19 days away, gang. 19 days away from Camden Yards rocking again. So excited. So next bit of Orioles news I guess I want to touch on is Colton Wong, who, talk about fighting for one of the last spots on the roster, was brought in as kind of this veteran guy to make this push to be a utility guy for them, but really was brought in because Mike Elias wants somebody to play second base who can bat left-handed. And we all think that's going to be Jackson Holliday. And still I think that's going to be Jackson Holliday. However, Jackson got off to a little slow start, so they wanted to bring in some veteran competition for that spot. We touched on that a few times. In fact, we touched on the connection between Wong and Jackson with Matt Holliday, Jackson's dad, which was very cool. So Colton Wong is doing everything he can to make this roster. He has not performed well at the plate. I'm not going to mince words. He hasn't looked good at the plate in his past few seasons. And it doesn't look like it's really there anymore. 1 for 9, and the one base knock was yesterday in the Tigers game. We talked about, I believe, him driving in a run, having a hit, RBI. But it hasn't looked great. However, guys are just getting their feet under them. Guys are getting comfortable. Guys are getting their timing back. So it's not insane to think that he's going to have a nice week and a half. Like this hit right there, his first base knock to drive in that run kind of sparks something. And then before you know it, he's at least batting mid-200s, and it's not horrible, okay? 1 for 9 isn't the end of the world. And like I said, he's doing everything he can to stay on this roster, make this roster out of camp. And he's another guy who could wind up going down to the minors and finding himself on this roster for at least a week or two at some point this season. But he's trying to expand his versatility. Again, he was brought in to play second base if he makes this roster. Give a left-handed bat at second base. But he came in saying he's willing to play at all of it. Now, he's had major league experience at all 3 outfield spots, and he wants to make sure you don't forget about that. He talked about that. But what he also did was come in and start playing some third base for them. Just trying it out, just showing them that he can play it. And he's had 1 or 2 nice plays, some routine, some not routine, some tough. And he's made them. So he hasn't played third base since he was at Hawaii, like 14 years ago or something, maybe 10. However long it's been quite some time, okay? So he hasn't played third base since he was at the University of Hawaii, being a fighting one of those Rainbow Warriors, all right? But he's had great success with his glove in the majors. 2 Gold Gloves. Like I said, has played all 3 outfield positions, known for playing second base. I believe he could play a nice third base. Are there going to be a couple plays maybe he boots, or maybe he doesn't get to, or maybe he misreads? Sure. Maybe a couple throws that are a little crazy? Possibly. Third base is a lot farther than second base as far as that throw goes. So, while second base he was talking about is more hands, he was saying third base is more feet. But I believe he could be successful with that. Again, the outfield is a lot more feet than hands. So, he's played that successfully. All I'm saying is he's doing everything he can, and you gotta love to see it. You'll love to see these veterans not coming in expecting or telling you what they play. Going, tell me what I play. Tell me anywhere to play. I just want to be out there. I want to be playing. I want to contribute. And hopefully he can get hot and make this decision for these Orioles a little more difficult. If not, I really hope we're able to retain him in the minors. I'm not positive about his contract. I want to say it was a minor league contract, which would mean we don't have to designate him. But I could be mistaken. In which case, I would hate to lose Colton Wong. Because that's a name I do think could have a little magical spark in him for a week or two for us. And those are huge. Those goes a long way to repeating what we did last season and winning 101 games and expanding what we did in the postseason and actually making a run to the ALCS and the World Series and potentially winning it all. I would love to see it. Now, talk about another guy that is finally kind of coming into his own this spring training, and that's Heston Kjerstad. Listen, entering yesterday, he was only 4 for 22 at the dish. Not good. Not good. But he, like I said earlier, he got his first multi-hit game yesterday. Went 2 for 3 with that double. It's nice to see him trending in the right direction. Okay? He said starting last week, he really started feeling good. So he's just getting dialed in. He's getting comfortable again. Yeah, that was essentially what he said. He's just getting comfortable again, starting to get dialed in. So it's exciting, though, to see him excel off the adversity. And we've talked about this multiple times, whether it be with Jackson Holiday or Heston Kjerstad or Colton Cowser or Adley Rushman. We talk about these guys facing the adversity and rising from it, becoming better, improving off of that. And that's what we're seeing out of Heston Kjerstad. And if he continues to be hot, if he continues to put up days like he did yesterday, he's going to make a real push for this team. Now, I still believe he's not making the roster out of camp. We will absolutely see Heston Kjerstad in Baltimore this year. We will see him for a long stretch because once he comes up, I'm assuming he's going to be successful enough to where he's up and he's not going anywhere. But it might take him another month or two. And previously we had talked about the reason being is creating that adversity. Or also the reason being getting him more plate appearances. Just every day. Getting those everyday reps. And those are both hugely important in his development. However, another part is truly working on the defense. Because the Orioles came in this year and they wanted to make sure that he knew that he needed to show them that he can play a consistent and solid corner outfield spot, along with first base. And he's doing that. We talked in a previous episode, he had a nice diving catch. He's been flashing the leather a little bit, showing his athleticism, not looking like he can't track a ball, not looking like he can't get to the ball. Remember, he's a lot more athletic than he gets credit for. I think people see this big-bodied guy, kind of goofy, and think he's not athletic. It reminds me a little of like Hunter Pence-ish. Okay, Hunter Pence was incredibly athletic, had some speed, had power, could play good defense, but it kind of never looked orthodox. It always was a little goofy, a little unorthodox, and I think Heston has some of that about him. That doesn't mean he can't be successful. And he's starting to show them that not only can he play a really good corner outfield, or at least a good enough corner outfield, and they can trust him out there, but also at first base, he was talking about how excited he's been working with our first base coach and really becoming better at that and becoming more comfortable. And again, the versatility of all these guys is something the Orioles emphasize. So I still believe no matter how hot Heston Kjerstad probably gets to end this year, or this spring training, excuse me, I still think he starts the season in Norfolk or Bowie. Most likely. But again, that's not a bad thing for him. That's not a bad thing for his development. And that's not a bad thing for the Orioles in general. Because he will be up. He will be an Oriole in this season. Health issues aside, knock on wood, I guarantee you Heston Kjerstad has a nice piece of season with the Baltimore Orioles this season. So then I want to go back to kind of the bullpen talk. I know we seem to talk the bullpen every episode, but to me, that's kind of like the biggest positional battle on the roster. Not only because you have the most names fighting for spots, but also, ultimately, because those names fighting for spots are serious major league talent. Guys that most teams would have almost guaranteed locked in a bullpen spot. And we have guys that, while they might be locked in are still fighting for their position because there's a lot of guys behind them showing serious talent. And the three names we're going to talk about, two I know we've talked a little in length about before. One, I think we've just mentioned a little. But they're all serious names and could all be in this bullpen breaking camp, okay? Big Mike Baumann is a guy that we continue to talk up on this show, and for good reason. So far this spring, Mike Baumann has had 3 perfect innings, 3 Ks, okay? He's looked very good. And we've seen that in past seasons with Mike Baumann. I'm a huge believer in Mike Baumann being a serious contender for this team. In fact, I believe in last episode with the Craig Kimbrell contingency plan, God, is that a tongue twister, we talked Mike Baumann has a outside chance at least to find his way into a closer role for this team if that comes to. But when you look at why he's most likely going to make the major league roster, not only is he pitching like one of the best relievers we have, but he's also out of options. We've talked in length about the options being so important. You talk about flexibility with the offensive, with the hitters and the positions they can play on defense, right? You also need flexibility as far as the options go. That's another form of flexibility for a roster construction. And when a guy's out of options and a guy's as talented as Mike Baumann, you don't want to lose him. He's been successful for this team, and he's continued to take strides. I want to say Mike Baumann at this point is a lock on the Orioles roster. Not just on opening day, but essentially through the entire season, pending injury. Okay? I think Mike Baumann's going to be a consistently good piece of this bullpen enough that he's not going anywhere. They'll never drop him. Maybe if he gets banged up at some point, he gets moved to the IL. But I don't think he comes off this roster at any point. I like Mike Baumann a lot. And one of the things they've talked about is his improved rhythm, which is leading to improved location. So, he's a big boy. There's a lot of moving pieces. So sometimes that can get a little out of whack. And I think that he's experienced that in past years. And that's kind of when his positive success has started to turn negative at times. I don't see that being a problem anymore. Or at least I see that being less of a problem now. Because, again, a big body, it's a long season. Eventually, you might lose a little mechanically here and there, and you got to bring it back. That happens a lot to these major leaguers. But clearly being out of options means he's been on this team for at least 2 or 3 years. So he's had the experience of going through that. And I believe, again, he shows the ability to improve year after year. So that to me shows me that when he's experiencing these positive and negative, these highs and lows, he learns from them and makes himself better off of them, which is one of the reasons why I want him in this pen. Also, he's working on, or at least improving on his changeup. His changeup is looking really good, and that's a positive thing. Adding another pitch. I believe he was mostly just fastball cutter in the past, and adding a true off-speed pitch, it helps. It helps him immensely, especially something that can have vertical break on it, not just the horizontal break of, let's say, a cutter to a fastball. I love Mike Baumann, and I think that he is not only a serious chance at staying in this Orioles bullpen for a while, but being very, very successful in it. Another name, and we've talked him up as one of the big X factors of this team, Dylan Tate. Dylan Tate also has 3 perfect innings this spring, 3 Ks. And if you look back, I forgot how well he pitched 2 years ago for the Orioles in 2022. An ERA of 3.05 in 65 appearances. No, 67. 67 appearances. So he's been successful at that major league level. And it seems all indications are pointing that he is pretty much locking himself up on the major league roster. However, he does have 2 options left. So when you're looking at this flexibility, if there winds up being a name who's out of options that you really like, You might wind up sending Dylan Tate down. He might just be a casualty of the talent that's on this Orioles roster. Either way, though, he will absolutely be in this bullpen for a long stretch of this season. Because you see every year, a guy had a great spring, a guy broke camp, and then kind of gets hit around. And he doesn't have that same success in the season, and he moves back to the minors. Maybe for a short period, maybe for a long period. It all depends on the guy. It all depends on the situation. So it's possible that Dylan Tate, by no fault of his own, might just get moved back to the minors for a little more seasoning with some in-game situations before they bring him back up, also allowing maybe another guy to stick around to see what he has during the regular season. However, when you see the stuff that Dylan Tate has, it's hard to think that he's not going to be on this team breaking camp. Because his sinker has been very heavy. And it's been apparent that it's been dominating hitters. Okay? Not only that, but he's been locating his slider for strikes. That's huge. Pitchers need to be able to locate their breaking balls for strikes in the major leagues to consistently get out hitters, especially the best hitters. So the idea that he's really locating his slider seems to me that he's taking that next step forward. Not only that, but his changeup has been much improved as well. So it's a great, great thing for this team. Now, the last name is Keegan Akin. Keegan Akin is a left-handed reliever that we've seen break camp with the Orioles. Last season broke camp with the Orioles. And he was that exact situation that kind of pitched great in camp and then got hit around and moved back down, and then he ended up getting injured, and then Keegan Akin's season kind of disappeared on him. But he's had 4 scoreless innings, no hits allowed, 1 walk, 4 Ks. 1 walk away from 4 perfect innings for Keegan Akin. He also has 1 option left, so it's not a guarantee he makes this team out of camp, but he's another guy that will absolutely be on the roster at some point this season. They're going to see what he has. And I've heard kind of talks about how the organization would love to have a third lefty and have him be the third lefty in the pen. So you got to think that's Danny Colome, Cionel Perez, and the third, Keegan Akin. But not only is there another left-hander or two in camp that could win that job, however, they also want a long man. And it seems to me as though that last spot's going to come down to either a third lefty or a long man, or a true long man. Now, I remember Keegan Akin used to be a starter. So, to me, I believe he could probably go 2, if not 3 innings every now and then. But you probably, if you're the Orioles, don't want to rely on that. Don't want to have to do that to him. You think he's probably better, and odds are statistically and analytically it shows that he is better when he only pitches 1 inning. But Keegan Akin, whether he breaks camp with this team or meets them later, could have a lot of success because he's a talented guy. He's been one of their top prospects as far as pitching goes for the past few years. So I'm excited to see what Keegan Akin can do, and hopefully he can take that next step and learn how to be successful in the majors consistently. So, gang, I think that's going to wrap it up. We're going to cut the episode a little early today. Just because, you know, there's not a ton going. We had that off day and then only 1 game since our last episode. And I think we got in a lot of good stuff today. We talked a lot of good stuff. And there's a lot more good stuff to come, gang. Again, I cannot wait for opening day at Camden Yards in 19 days. I promise you that. And we're going to talk a lot more before that opening day comes. So until then, this was the Talkin Orioles Baseball Podcast. Let's go, O's!
Talking baseball, baseball.